The sound of the river never stopped. It whispered through the night like an old song, wrapping around the huts and the smoke that curled from their roofs. The air smelled of wet clay, firewood, and the faint sweetness of crushed reeds. It was the year 1200, though no one in that small riverside settlement would have called it that. To them, time was the rise and fall of the river, the coming and going of the fish, and the slow rhythm of the seasons. At dawn, mist rolled off the water, drifting between the huts like pale ghosts. The people stirred, one by one, their movements slow, deliberate, shaped by habit and hunger. They woke not to alarms or bells, but to the splash of oars, the crackle of fire, and the low murmur of voices speaking the same words they'd spoken all their lives. A man stepped from his hut, bare feet sinking into the cool mud. His beard was thick and tangled, his hair tied back with a strip of leather. He carried a fishing spear across his shoulder, the tip sharpened and blackened by fire. His wife followed soon after, her hands carrying a small clay pot filled with yesterday's embers. The village itself was no more than a scattering of huts built from reeds, clay, and branches taken from the forest. The roofs were low, sloped to shed rainwater into shallow ditches that ran toward the river. At the edge of the settlement stood a wooden platform, half broken, jutting out over the water, a place for drying fish and watching for boats. But boats were rare. The people who lived here had little to trade, and fewer still who traveled this far downriver. The children were always the first to run toward the water. Barefoot and half-dressed, they chased each other along the bank, their laughter mingling with the cries of the herons that stalked the shallows. They collected smooth stones, shaped bits of wood into toys, and learned the names of the creatures that shared their world. The longfish with silver bellies, the black birds that circled the reeds, the snakes that slid silently between roots. By mid-morning, the village was alive. Smoke rose in thin trails. Women sat together near the fire pits, weaving mats from reeds or grinding dried grains into powder with smooth stones. The sound of grinding carried through the air, rhythmic, patient, endless. Some women hummed while they worked, their voices soft, like the sound of the river itself. The men gathered by the shore, checking nets, repairing baskets, or shaping wooden paddles. Every task had its place. Every hand knew its work. There were no coins here, no words for wealth. Value was in the catch, in the strength of one's hands, in the knowledge passed down from parent to child. A man who could read the river, who could tell by the color of the current when the fish would come, was worth more than a dozen warriors. And yet they all carried knives. Life was fragile, and danger never far. Sometimes strangers came from the forest, traders, wanderers, or raiders. Sometimes the river itself rose in anger, sweeping away homes and people alike. When the sun climbed high, the fishermen pushed their canoes into the current. The sound of wood against water was deep and steady. Each man stood barefoot in his boat, spear poised, eyes narrow against the glare. They spoke little. Fishing was not only work, it was a kind of prayer. The river fed them, but it could also take. Beneath its calm surface lurked creatures no one named aloud, great shadows that stirred the depths, things that swallowed nets whole. The old ones told stories of them at night, warning the children never to fish alone after sunset. In the forest beyond the riverbank, life was dense and humming. The air there smelled of earth and decay, of mushrooms and damp leaves. Paths twisted between towering trees, narrow trails marked by stones or scraps of cloth tied to branches. Hunters moved quietly through the undergrowth, boughs in hand, listening for the rustle of deer or the crack of a twig. They wore animal skins and carried small charms made of bone and feather. Before every hunt, they touched the charms to their lips and whispered to the spirits of the forest, asking forgiveness for what they would take. Back at the river, the women tended fires. The crackling flames reflected in their eyes as they smoked fish, stirred pots, or mended nets. Children gathered near them, eager for scraps. Occasionally, one of the older women told stories, tales of the first people who had come to this river. When the world was still new and the sky was closer, she said the river had a spirit, a great one that could take the shape of a woman or a serpent. If she was pleased, she gave fish in abundance. If angered, she sent floods. The younger women listened in silence, pretending not to believe. But when lightning flashed in the distance, they whispered small prayers under their breath. Evening came slowly. The light softened, turning gold, then red. The fishermen returned, their boats heavy or empty depending on the day's luck. When the nets were full, the village celebrated laughter, singing the smell of roasted fish. When they were not, silence spread like fog. Hunger was a familiar guest, one they could not drive away. Still, no one complained aloud. They simply worked harder, rose earlier, prayed longer. The nights were long by the river. Firelight flickered across faces, casting shadows that danced against the walls of the huts. The elders sat closest to the flames, their voices gravelly, telling stories that stretched across generations. They spoke of floods that drowned whole families, of winters when the river froze solid, and of a time when strangers came in boats made of metal and cloth. No one knew whether those stories were true, but everyone listened. In a place where the world could change overnight, memory was the only map they had. Sometimes, during the quiet hours before dawn, when the moon hung low over the water, a strange sound could be heard, a deep, mournful hum that seemed to come from beneath the surface. The villagers said it was the river spirit calling to someone, though no one knew who. Dogs would whine, babies would cry, and even the elders would fall silent until the sound faded. Days passed like this, the same, yet never the same. The people rose with the sun and slept with the stars. Their lives were written in the rhythm of the current, their fates tied to its moods. When the rains came, the river swelled and carried silt into the fields. When drought came, cracks split the earth and fish vanished. They built small altars of stone along the bank, laying offerings of grain, feathers, and sometimes blood. It was not worship in the way distant kingdoms understood it. It was gratitude and fear, and the hope that the river would remember them kindly. One morning, before dawn, a thick fog covered the village. The air was cold, heavy with moisture. A fisherman waded into the shallows, spear in hand, eyes fixed on the dim outline of the water. He heard something move, not the splash of a fish, but something larger. He froze, breath shallow. The fog swirled, parting just enough to reveal a shape, a dark, gliding figure beneath the surface, longer than any boat. He stepped back, but his foot slipped, and in that moment, the shape vanished. The water rippled once and was still. When he returned to the village, pale and shaking, he spoke no word. He only threw his spear into the mud and sat by the fire until his hands stopped trembling. The others did not ask what he had seen. They knew better than to speak of such things. But that night, no one went near the river. Even the children stayed close to the fires, eyes wide and watchful. As the days passed, stories spread, growing with each retelling. Some said he had seen the river spirit herself, angry at something the villagers had done. Others said it was only a log drifting in the current. But when the fish disappeared for 3 days and the river turned a strange shade of green, everyone began to whisper prayers again. In this world, survival was not a battle to be won. It was a balance to be kept. The river gave, and it took. The people endured, not because they were strong, but because they had no other choice. Their hands were scarred, their backs bent, but their eyes carried the light of the fire and the reflection of the water. And in that light, they found meaning, even in hunger, even in fear. When the wind blew across the reeds and the moon shone silver on the surface of the river, it was easy to believe that life had always been this way, quiet, fragile, eternal. The river kept its secrets, and the people kept theirs. And so they lived, one tide at a time, waiting for morning to come again. The rain came without warning. It began as a thin drizzle before dawn, whispering across the roofs, then turned into a relentless downpour that swallowed every sound except the thunder. By midday, the river had changed its color. What had once been clear and calm was now a rushing torrent of brown and foam, carrying branches, roots, and broken baskets downstream. The air smelled of wet earth and rot. The villagers stood by the edge, watching in uneasy silence. They knew this was how the river spoke when it was angry. The elders gathered near the largest hut, their faces lined and unreadable. A fire burned weakly inside, its smoke curling through the cracks in the roof. One of them, an old woman with silver hair and a scar running across her cheek, threw handfuls of dried herbs into the flames. The smoke turned blue and thick. She murmured words in a language older than any of them, her voice trembling but steady. The others bowed their heads, each holding a piece of carved wood shaped like a fish, offerings meant to calm the spirit of the river. Outside, the wind rose. Sheets of rain slapped the ground, turning paths into streams and huts into islands of mud. Children were pulled indoors, animals tied to posts. The sound of thunder rolled across the sky like the growl of something ancient. The villagers had seen floods before, but this storm felt different, heavier, hungrier. The river had risen almost to the edge of the huts, licking at their walls as night fell. Lightning illuminated the world in flashes, the forest bending, the waves crashing, faces lit in momentary terror. Inside one of the huts, a woman sat beside her husband, clutching a small bundle to her chest. Their child had been born only a week before, still fragile and small. Each rumble of thunder made the baby stir and cry, and the mother whispered lullabies to quiet it. But outside, the wind screamed louder than her voice. Hours passed. The rain did not stop. Water began seeping into the huts, creeping up through the floors. Men tried to dig small trenches to guide it away, but the earth was too soft. The firewood was soaked, the flames weak and dying. One by one, the fires went out until the only light came from the sky. Then, through the roar of the rain, someone shouted a warning. The river had broken its bank. Panic spread like fire. People rushed to grab what they could, tools, baskets, their children, and fled toward the higher ground near the forest. The sound of rushing water filled the air. The ground trembled beneath their feet as the river surged into the village, tearing through fences and carrying away everything that stood in its path. A hut collapsed with a crash, its roof vanishing under the water. In the chaos, a young man turned back. His mother was still inside their hut, unable to move quickly after an old injury. He waded through waist-deep water, the current tugging at his legs. The air was thick with rain, impossible to breathe. He reached the hut just as it began to tilt. Inside, his mother clung to a wooden post, her eyes wide. He grabbed her arm, pulling her close, and together they fought their way out as the structure gave way behind them. The river roared, swallowing the place they had called home. They made it to the edge of the forest, where others had gathered shivering, drenched, eyes fixed on the destruction below. The village was gone, or nearly so. Only the tops of a few roofs were visible, and even those were drifting away. The rain still fell, but softer now, as if the storm had spent its fury. The people stood in silence, watching as their lives were carried downstream. By morning, the rain stopped. Mist rose from the ground, and the air was cold, clean, and eerily still. The survivors moved carefully down toward what was left of the village. The river had carved new paths, swallowing old ones. The earth was littered with broken wood, torn nets, and the remains of what once was. A few fish lay stranded in the mud, their silver bodies glistening in the weak sunlight. The smell of decay hung thick. They began to rebuild, though none spoke much as they worked. The men dragged fallen branches and split logs, shaping them into temporary shelters. The women gathered what food they could find: roots, berries, the few fish that had not rotted. Children helped in silence, too young to understand, too tired to play. There was no ceremony for what they had lost. Grief was not spoken. It was carried in their movements, in the slow way they worked, in the way no one looked at the river for long. That evening, as the sun sank behind the forest, a strange quiet settled over them. The river moved slower now, as if ashamed of its violence. A few people said it was the spirit's punishment that someone had offended her. Others said it was only nature beyond anyone's will. But when night came, the old woman with the scar gathered the survivors around the fire and began to speak. She told them of a time long ago, before any of them were born, when another flood had come. It had taken everything, even lives. But the people then had survived because they offered the river something precious. Not food, not gold, but a promise. They had vowed never to forget that the river was alive, that it listened and felt. "We took too much," she said, her eyes glinting in the firelight. And she remembered. The villagers listened, their faces lit by the orange glow. Some believed her, others just stared into the flames. One of the younger men, the same who had saved his mother, asked in a low voice, "What can we give her now? We have nothing left." The old woman looked at him for a long moment before answering. "You give her your respect, your patience. You rebuild, not as if you own this land, but as if you borrow it." Her words lingered in the silence. The fire cracked, sending sparks into the dark. Beyond the light, the forest whispered. An owl called somewhere in the trees. Slowly, the people began to nod, one by one, not because they understood, but because they needed to believe something, anything, after what they had lost. Days turned into weeks. The sun returned, drying the mud and warming the ground. Green shoots began to rise where the water had receded. The people rebuilt their huts higher this time, farther from the river's edge. They used stronger wood, lashed tighter with vines, their hands blistered from work. Each night they lit fires and told stories, not of the flood, but of survival. They did not name their fear aloud, but it was there in the way they watched the river, in the way they flinched when it rose, even a little. The young man who had saved his mother became quiet. He spent hours each day sitting by the river, staring at the current. He said little to anyone. Some nights, people saw him standing knee-deep in the water, unmoving, as if listening to something. When asked, he only said, "She's calmer now." And yet, the river never forgot. One night, weeks after the flood, the moon shone bright and full, turning the water silver. The wind was still. The village slept, but the young man woke suddenly. He thought he heard a voice, soft, distant, almost like a song. It came from the river. He stepped outside, heart pounding. The sound grew clearer, a woman's voice, low and sorrowful. Weaving through the air, he walked toward it barefoot until he stood at the edge of the water. The river shimmered under the moonlight. For a moment, he saw something move, a shape just below the surface, long and smooth, gliding like silk. Then the voice stopped. The night returned to silence. He stood there for a long time, breathing slowly until dawn painted the sky pale gold. When he turned back to the village, he felt something change, not in the river, but in himself. A strange calm, a quiet understanding that survival was not just about enduring, but about belonging. When he spoke to the others that morning, his words were simple. "We live because she allows it." No one argued. They only nodded and went on with their work. The river flowed on, quiet once more, as if it too was listening. The seasons changed slowly, almost without notice. The river that had once raged with fury now flowed calm and wide again. though its banks were scarred. The villagers called that year the Great Flood Year, and even when the water receded, the memory stayed, carved into their faces, carried in their sleep. But life, like the river, never stopped. Green shoots pushed through the cracked soil. The trees regained their leaves, and soon smoke rose from new huts built farther inland, safer, stronger. Every morning began with silence. The mist over the river lingered longer now, curling through the trees like white cloth. The air was heavy, not with fear anymore, but with the weight of remembering. People moved slower, spoke less. The laughter of children returned first, fragile, uncertain, echoing through the reeds. They chased frogs and threw stones into the shallows. The young man who had once saved his mother had changed. He worked harder than anyone else. His body lean, his hands rough from days spent shaping wood and carrying stone. The others began to look to him without words, following his example, trusting his quiet strength. Sometimes, the old woman with the scar would watch him from beside the fire, nodding to herself as if she saw something the others could not. The beginnings of a leader born from loss. One evening, as the sky burned orange, the young man sat by the river, the same place where he had once heard the voice beneath the water. The current whispered softly, carrying fragments of leaves and petals. He dipped his hand in and let the cold flow around his fingers. The river no longer frightened him. It felt almost like an old friend, unpredictable but alive. He spoke aloud, not expecting an answer. "You could have taken us all," he said quietly, "but you didn't. I don't know why." The water rippled once, as if stirred by breath. Behind him, footsteps approached. It was his mother. She sat beside him, her knees drawn close, her hands clasped. For a long while, neither spoke. Then she said, "The river doesn't choose who it takes. It just reminds us that we belong to it." He nodded, still staring at the current. "Do you think she forgives?" His mother smiled faintly. "Forgiveness isn't what we should ask for, only permission to stay." Their words vanished into the wind. The night came with a cool breeze, carrying the smell of rain, though the sky was clear. Somewhere in the forest, an animal cried out, short, sharp, and in silence. The next morning, something unexpected appeared. A canoe. It drifted slowly down from a river, carrying two figures none of them had ever seen before. They were strangers, their clothes woven from bark and colored with dyes unfamiliar to the villagers. The younger one held a long spear tipped with obsidian. The elder wore a necklace made of teeth and shells. When they stepped onto the bank, the villagers gathered at a distance. Wary Dot, the old woman, stepped forward first. Leaning on her stick, "Who are you?" she asked in the river tongue. The elder stranger tilted his head. His voice was rough but calm. "Travelers, from the high waters, far to the north." They had come, he said, following the river for months, looking for new land, new trade. Their own home had been swallowed, not by flood, but by drought. The same river that drowned one village had abandoned another. The people here listened in silence. Drought was something they could barely imagine. To them, the river had always been too full, too wild. That night, the strangers shared food with the villagers, dried fish, strange roots, and a thick drink made from ground seeds. They spoke of places where the water had turned to dust, where people fought over wells, where animals lay dead in cracked earth. The villagers listened, and for the first time, the young man realized the river that ruled their lives did not end here. It stretched farther than he had ever imagined, through forests, mountains, other lives, other stories. In the days that followed, the strangers stayed. They helped repair nets, taught new ways of shaping clay so it wouldn't crack, and told stories by the fire. Their knowledge was old, practical, born of hardship, but their eyes, especially the younger ones, carried something else, a warning. One evening, when the moon was half hidden behind clouds, the younger stranger stood beside the young man near the shore. "You think the river is your friend," he said quietly, "but one day it will leave you too." The young man frowned. "How can a river leave? It has always been here." The stranger shook his head. "Ours was always there too." He turned, looking into the dark water. "Until one year, it didn't come back." The words lingered long after he walked away. Weeks passed, and soon the strangers prepared to continue their journey. The villagers gave them food, water, and what small gifts they could spare. Before leaving, the elder took the young man's hands and pressed something into them, a small stone carved with a symbol that looked like a wave. "Keep this," he said. "When the river changes, you'll know what it means." Then they were gone, their canoe gliding silently into the dawn mist. The young man carried the stone everywhere, hanging it from a cord around his neck. Some nights, he touched it without realizing, feeling the grooves worn smooth by another hand long ago. Life went on as before, the fishing, the weaving, the endless rhythm of survival. But there was something different now, something in the air that no one could name. One morning, he woke to a sound he had never heard before. Silence. No birds, no insects, not even the whisper of the reeds. He stepped outside, heart uneasy, and walked toward the river. The mist was thick, low, and cold, but when he reached the edge, his breath caught. The river had dropped, not by much, only the height of a hand. But to him, it felt like the world had shifted. The wet line on the rocks showed clearly where the water had been yesterday, higher, fuller. Now it was lower, slower. He stared at it for a long time, unsure whether to be afraid. By evening, the villagers noticed too. The water, once always restless, seemed sluggish, tired. The old woman said nothing at first, only watched the flow, her eyes narrow. "She's sleeping," someone said hopefully. But the old woman shook her head. "No, she's remembering." Days turned to weeks, and the water kept dropping. The fish grew scarce. Nets came up half empty. The air smelled strange, dry, and metallic. Cracks began to form along the riverbank, where mud had always been soft. The villagers grew quiet again, their laughter fading. Some whispered that the strangers had cursed them. Others said the spirit was angry because they had rebuilt too far from her touch. The young man tried to calm them, though he felt the same fear. Each evening, he walked to the shore, holding the carved stone, whispering words that were neither prayer nor plea, just fragments of thought, carried away by the wind. Then, one night, he dreamed. In the dream, he stood in the riverbed, the water gone, the sky burning red. From the far distance came a sound, the same voice he had heard years before. But this time, it was different. Not sorrowful, but cold, commanding. "You forgot," it said. "You took too much, and now I rest." He woke, gasping, drenched in sweat. The sound of the river was faint now, barely more than a whisper. When he went outside, the air was still. The moonlight revealed the truth. The river had shrunk even more. What had once been a wide, endless body of water was now narrow, shallow, thin. The villagers gathered at dawn. Panic rippled through them like a second flood, this one of fear. The old woman stood before them, her face pale in the light. "It's happening again," she says softly. "Not as before. This time, she takes herself away." The young man looked at the river, then at the stone in his hand. Its carved lines seemed deeper now, the shape of a wave, twisting like it was alive. He didn't understand its meaning yet, but he felt its weight and the promise carried within it. He knew then that survival was not just about rebuilding. It was about understanding the river, not only when it raged, but when it fell silent. The people began to gather wood, dig channels, search for deeper pools where water still lingered. They worked together, desperate but determined. They prayed, but more than that, they listened for any sign, any whisper, any return of the voice beneath the water. The sun burned hotter each day. The air shimmered. The river receded, but not completely. beneath the surface, somewhere unseen, it still moved, slow but alive, waiting. And as the young man stood on the dry, cracked edge, staring at the last glimmer of silver flowing through the mud, he whispered, "You can rest, but we will not forget." The wind shifted then, carrying a faint scent of rain. It was not the end, only the river's pause in the beginning of another test. Dry season deepened, and the river became little more than a path of glimmering mud and memory. The air carried a taste of dust now, sharp, bitter, the kind that stuck to the back of the throat. The once green reeds turned brown and brittle, breaking underfoot. The people, who had once measured time by the movement of water, now counted their days by cracks in the earth. They rose earlier each morning, before the sun could scorch the ground, and walked farther than ever to find water. The old woman had marked a few remaining pools where the current still clung to life. Deep hollows shaded by overhanging roots. Each day they carried clay pots there, filled them carefully, and returned before the heat turned the path into a furnace. Even the animals had learned the new routes there, dogs and wild boars drinking side by side, their reflections trembling in the shallow water. The young man led most of these journeys. His shoulders had grown hard from carrying the weight of pots, and his eyes were lined from staring at the horizon for any sign of clouds. He still wore the carved stone around his neck, and sometimes, when the air was completely still, he could feel it thrum faintly, as if remembering what water once sounded like. At night, the village sat in near darkness. Fires were kept small. Wood was precious. The smell of smoke was thin now, mixed with the scent of earth and sweat. Conversation came in whispers about the crops that wouldn't grow, about children who had started coughing from the dust, about how long the river could sleep before it forgot to wake. The elders said the river spirit was not gone, only testing them. But even their voices had lost their certainty. Then, one dawn, something strange happened. The sky, usually pale and cloudless, had changed overnight. A line of gray clouds hung low to the west, thick and heavy. The air felt different, electric, alive. The people stepped out of their huts and stared, shielding their eyes. The old woman closed hers and whispered, "She's breathing again." But the rain did not come that day, nor the next. The clouds hovered, unmoving, as if deciding. The young man began to dream again, strange, vivid dreams of the riverbed filling with silver light instead of water, of the carved stone in his hand, glowing like fire. In one dream, he saw the strangers from the north standing beside him, their mouths moving, but their words drowned out by wind. On the seventh day of waiting, a group of hunters returned from the forest with news. They had found something, a new spring bubbling from a hollow between rocks a few miles upstream. The water was clear and cold, and around it grew plants no one had seen before, small and green with blue flowers. The villagers followed the hunters there the next morning, walking through dry grass and heat that shimmered like fire. When they reached the spring, they fell silent. The air around it was cooler, and the sound of the trickling water was so gentle it made their hearts ache. The old woman knelt first, cupping her hands and drinking. Tears ran down her face, mixing with the water. "It's her gift," she said softly. "Not the river we lost, but the one we've earned." The people built a new settlement near the spring. It wasn't large, only a few huts at first, but it was alive. They dug shallow channels to guide the water toward the fields, planted seeds again, and watched them sprout after so many months of emptiness. The air began to smell of earth and hope died still. The young man often walked back to the old riverbed. He couldn't stay away. He would sit on the cracked earth, running his fingers through the dry mud, and listen. Once, when the wind blew just right, he thought he heard the faintest murmur, a sigh beneath the ground, as though the river still whispered below, unseen. He spoke to it as he had before. "We found another way," he said, "but we haven't forgotten you." The silence that followed was not empty. It was deep, alive, like the pause between breaths. Months passed, and the new life took root. Children played near the spring, their feet muddy again. Crops grew short, but green. The people smiled more often. They learned to store water, to dig deeper wells, to live not by the river's mercy alone, but by their own patience. Still, the elders taught the children the old songs, songs about the flood, the drought, and the voice beneath the water. Never think she's gone, they said. She only moves. One night, during the harvest moon, the young man stood alone near the spring. The carved stone felt warm against his chest. The sky was wide and clear, stars bright enough to see their reflections in the water. And for the first time since the flood, he felt peace, not because the river had returned, but because he understood it never truly left. It had changed, as all living things must. He closed his eyes and listened. The insects hummed, the leaves rustled, and somewhere deep in the earth, faint and slow, came the sound of water moving, not loud, not near, but steady. The young man smiled. "You're still here," he whispered in the distance. Thunder rolled, soft, uncertain, like the first heartbeat after sleep. The next morning, the villagers awoke to the smell of rain. It fell lightly at first, then stronger, soaking the dry ground until steam rose from it. The children laughed and ran under the sky, their hands open. The old woman lifted her face to the clouds, tears mingling with raindrops. "She returns when we remember who we are," she said. The young man stood at the edge of the spring, water lapping at his feet. The carved stone glowed faintly in the gray light, and he felt the pulse of the river again, not beneath him, but within him, the rhythm of survival, of surrender, of belonging. When the rain ended, the land was alive once more. Streams branched out from the spring, snaking toward the old riverbed where puddles began to form. The earth drank deeply, and a low, distant sound rose, the first murmur of a current finding its voice again that night. The young man dreamt not of flood or drought, but of balance of water flowing just enough, of people working side by side, of the spirit of the river watching in silence. And when he woke, the world felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. The river had returned, not as before, but as something new, wiser, quieter, and shared that. And so they lived again, not beside the river, but with it. The cycle continued, as it always had, as it always would. Many years had passed since the great flood and the long drought. The faces that once knew both had grown older, their hair turned silver, their hands marked by time and work. The village beside the spring had become larger now, not a handful of huts anymore, but a settlement of families, generations woven together like reeds in a mat. The air was warmer, gentler. Children who had never seen the old river ran along the fields, laughing, chasing birds that rose in flocks above the green. The young man who had once led them through drought was no longer young. His shoulders were broader, his eyes deeper, quieter. People came to him for advice, for stories, for decisions about where to plant, when to fish, how to survive. He never called himself a leader, but the others spoke his name with a kind of quiet respect. Around his neck, the carved stone still hung, worn smooth from years of touch. At dawn, he often walked alone to where the old river had once flowed. The bed was no longer cracked and barren. Over time, grass had returned, and a thin stream cut through the center, not wide, but alive. Birds nested along its edge, and frogs sang again at night. He would stand there for long moments, breathing the scent of wet earth, listening to the water's faint murmur. It reminded him of voices, not words, but presence. The river still lived in the bones of the land. One morning, as the mist curled through the trees, a child followed him, a boy of about 10, curious, restless, full of questions. He was the son of two farmers who had grown up after the flood. "Why do you come here when the spring is better?" The boy asked, tilting his head. "There's more water there," the man smiled. "Because this place remembers," he said. "Remembers what?" He looked at the horizon where the first light touched the distant trees. "Everything that made us." The boy frowned, not understanding, but he sat beside him anyway. Together they listened to the whisper of water, to the hum of insects, to the faint echo of a world that refused to be forgotten. That night, the village held a festival, something new, something the younger generation had invented. They called it the Festival of Return. People gathered by the spring, lit torches, and placed them along the banks. The children sang songs that had once been prayers, though they didn't know their full meanings anymore. The old woman with the scar had long since passed, but her stories lived on. They were told again and again, reshaped with each retelling. The river had become legend, a spirit, a warning. As the torches flickered against the dark water, the man felt a tug of memory, the rain, the hunger, the voice beneath the surface. He stood quietly, letting the sound of laughter wash over him. For the first time, he realized something simple yet profound. The river had not only given them life, it had taught them how to live without certainty. That was its greatest gift. Later that night, when the fires burned low, he walked alone toward the forest. The moonlight turned the ground silver, and the stream beside him shimmered like glass. Somewhere in the distance, he heard singing, not from the village, not human. It was low and slow, like the hum of water through stone. He stopped walking, his breath shallow. The sound grew clearer from the bend in the stream. Mist rose. It twisted upward, shaping itself into the faint outline of a figure. Tall, graceful, shimmering. The air grew cold, but not cruel. The man's heart pounded, yet he did not move. He had seen this before, years ago, in dreams. The figure spoke, though its lips never moved. The words came not to his ears, but to his thoughts. He remembered. The man lowered his head. "We tried." The voice was soft, neither male nor female, carrying the weight of the river itself. "You learned to listen. You learned to wait. You learned that the earth is not yours, but you are hers." He said nothing. The mist drifted closer, its glow touching the stone around his neck. It pulsed once with light, then dimmed again. "When the river sleeps," the voice said, "you must guard her dreams." Then the mist thinned, folded into itself, and was gone. The sound faded, leaving only the night and the faint murmur of the stream. He stood there a long time before returning to the village. The sky had begun to lighten, the first hint of dawn spilling across the trees. When he reached his hut, the boy from that morning was waiting by the door, half asleep. "Did you find something?" the boy asked. The man smiled faintly. "Just the river," he said. "She's still awake." Years passed, and life moved forward. The settlement grew into a small town. Trade routes began to form along the spring, paths worn smooth by travelers who carried stories from faraway lands. The people prospered, not with gold or power, but with knowledge, with patience. They built with stone now, with wood that could last through storms. They still fished, still sang, still gave offerings when the rains came. The spirit of the river lived not in the water anymore, but in their ways, in how they worked, shared, endured. And yet, even as the world around them changed, the man continued his morning walks to the old river's edge. Sometimes others joined him. More often, he went alone. The grass grew tall where the flood had once swept through. Wildflowers spread in colors he didn't remember seeing before. The stream had widened slightly over the years, sung a little louder. One morning, long after the boy had grown into a man of his own, they walked there together. The younger man spoke of plans to dig a new channel from the stream to the fields, to build stronger walls against the rains, to plant new crops that could endure dry seasons. The older man listened and nodded, pride warming his chest. "Do what you must," he said, "but never forget to listen first." The younger man smiled. To the river. To everything, the elder replied. That evening, the sun set in gold, and the world turned quiet. The elder walked once more to the riverbank. He sat down on a smooth stone, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath him. The carved stone around his neck felt warm, alive. The wind rustled through the reeds, carrying a faint hum, the voice he had known all his life. You watched well, it whispered. He closed his eyes. And you never left. The sound faded into the rhythm of the water, the eternal heartbeat of the land. The man breathed slowly, peacefully, until all sound became one. The river, the wind, the world. When morning came, the villagers found him still sitting there, his face calm, his hand resting in the grass. The carved stone lay beside him, gleaming faintly in the light. They buried him near the water, as was their custom, and built a cairn of smooth river stones above the grave. The stream flowed quietly nearby, as if keeping watch. Generations passed. The old stories became songs, then myths, then fragments. But the people never stopped visiting the riverbank. They still placed flowers there, still touched the stones before fishing or planting. And when the rains came, as they always did, sometimes gentle, sometimes fierce, they said it was the river spirit remembering her promise. The land changed. The people changed. But the rhythm remained. Water would rise and fall and rise again. And in every ripple, in every echo, there lived the memory of those who had listened. Centuries passed, and the land changed beyond recognition. Forests grew and vanished, replaced by fields, then by roads, then by towns. The spring that had once fed the people's lives still flowed, though it had shifted slightly, winding through what was now farmland. The air no longer smelled of wood smoke and clay. It carried the faint metallic tints of iron, oil, and dust from carts and tools. The descendants of those who had once worshipped the river no longer remembered her name. They spoke of harvests, of weather, of trade, but not of spirits. The cairn by the stream had fallen into ruin, its stones scattered and half buried in weeds. To most, it was just an old pile of rock, perhaps once a boundary marker, nothing more. And yet, some nights, when the wind blew from the west and the moon was full, the stream still shimmered faintly, as though light moved within it instead of above it. The old ones, the few who still cared to listen, said that was the river remembering itself. But no one paid much attention anymore. One such night, under a low sky filled with mist, a young woman walked along the water's edge. Her name was not remembered in songs, but her curiosity was the same as those who came before her. She was a scholar of sorts, a keeper of old things, though few cared for her work. In her hands, she carried a small book bound in worn leather, filled with notes about the land, the weather, and the strange rhythms that still pulsed through the soil after heavy rain. Her torchlight flickered over the ground as she knelt beside the water. The stream whispered softly against the stones, and she traced her fingers along its surface. It was warmer than it should have been. Beneath the surface, something gleamed faintly, a smooth, carved stone, half buried in silk dot. She frowned, brushing away the mud. The carving was faint but deliberate, spirals that met at the center, like waves converging. Around its edge were symbols she did not recognize, not words, but shapes that seemed to move when she looked too long. She placed the stone on the grass and opened her notebook. Unrecorded artifact, she whispered to herself. Material, unknown. Possible origin, pre-agricultural. As she wrote, the wind changed. The torch flickered, then dimmed. The water stilled. She looked up, uneasy. The night was utterly quiet. No insects, no rustling. Only the faint hum of something vast and invisible. Then she heard it. A sound, not quite a voice, not quite a vibration, moving through the air, through the ground, through her pulse. It was faint, like the echo of breath underwater. She froze, listening. The sound formed into words that weren't words, not spoken, yet understood. "You found me." She gasped and looked around, but no one was there. The stream rippled faintly, as if stirred by something beneath. She took a step back, heart pounding. The air grew cool, thick, almost alive. The torch went out completely. Darkness pressed around her, and for a moment she thought she could see shapes in it, forms made of mist and memory. A woman's silhouette, long and flowing, her hair like water. "Who are you?" The scholar whispered. The answer came not as speech, but as sensation. Warmth against her skin, sorrow in her chest, and a single word echoing in her mind. "Remember?" She blinked, and the vision was gone. The torch flared back to life. The night sounds returned. Crickets, wind, the faint rush of water. But the stone she had found was glowing softly now, light pulsing from within like a heartbeat. She picked it up carefully. It felt warm, almost alive. And for a second, she thought she heard a faint hum coming from it, like a lullaby in a language too old to know. She wrapped it in cloth and carried it home. Days turned into weeks, and she couldn't stop thinking about the stone. She tested it, drew it, compared it to every record she could find. But there was nothing, no mention of such markings, no record of a culture that used them. It was as if it came from a time before history began, and every night she dreamt of water, of rivers flowing backward, of floods swallowing mountains, of voices singing beneath the current. In her dreams, she saw the young man, though she didn't know who he was, standing by a vast, ancient river, holding the same stone she now kept by her bedside. He would look at her, wordless, and point toward the horizon, where storm clouds gathered. One morning, she woke to the sound of rain. Heavy, sudden, endless rain. It had not rained like this in years. The earth trembled with the weight of it. People in the town ran to close their shutters, shouting to one another. The small stream swelled, broke its banks, and began to roar. By midday, water had flooded the lower fields. The scholar stood by her window, watching as the stream became a torrent, carrying branches, tools, bits of fence. And in that chaos, she heard it again, that voice, ancient and steady, rising above the storm. "Do not fear the water that takes. It is the same that gives." The sound vibrated through her bones, calm and immense. She grabbed the cloth-wrapped stone and ran outside into the rain. The streets were rivers now. She pushed through the current, feet slipping, heart pounding, till she reached the place where she had found the stone. The cairn was gone, the land transformed. Lightning split the sky. The ground shuddered, and for a moment she saw her reflection in the flood, not as she was, but as something older, deeper. The figure of the woman made of water looked back at her from beneath the surface. "Why me?" she whispered. The answer came like thunder and lullaby at once. "Because you listened." The ground beneath her feet softened, but she stood her ground. The stone pulsed with light again, not bright, but steady, like the beat of a heart. The rain began to slow, and the water, instead of destroying, began to sink into the earth. Within minutes, the flood receded. The stream calmed, reshaped, and found a new course through the valley. When the storm passed, the land looked renewed. The soil glistened, dark and rich. The air smelled of life. The scholar fell to her knees, exhausted, drenched, and trembling. The stone lay beside her, its light fading, its warmth gone, but she smiled faintly. She knew now what she had found, not an artifact, but a promise. In the days that followed, the townsfolk spoke of the storm that had come and gone without ruin. The crops grew stronger, wells filled again, and though no one could explain it, people said they felt lighter, as if something heavy had been lifted from the land. The scholar wrote everything she could remember, the voice, the storm, the storm. But as time passed, her words began to sound like myths again. The world moved forward, and the old stories became stories once more. Yet, on quiet nights, when the moon was high and the wind was still. The stream still glowed faintly, not enough to draw attention, but enough for those who truly watched to see. The spirit of the river had stirred again, and through the one who listened, Teet had remembered itself. The world had changed again. 1,000 years had passed since the night of the storm that reshaped the valley. The river still flowed, though few called it that anymore. It was a narrow, winding body of water that cut through what had become a city, a vast sprawl of glass and steel, humming with electricity and light. Bridges arched over it, trains roared beside it, and the sound of engines drowned out the whisper of the current. No one remembered the name of the woman who had once found the glowing stone. No one remembered the cairn, the young man, or the flood. History had dissolved into dust and legend. Yet, beneath the surface of the river, where light couldn't reach, something old still moved, slow, patient, watching. The city called the River Line 27 after the transport route that ran alongside it. To most, it was just a part of the drainage system, a channel to carry runoff water away. Few ever looked at it long enough to notice that even in the darkest nights, its surface shimmered faintly, as if lit from below. One of those few was a boy named Elias. He lived in one of the tall residential towers near the river's bend. His window faced the water, and every night he would watch it instead of sleeping. His mother called it a bad habit. "It's just dirty water, nothing more," she'd say. But Elias didn't believe her. The river made sounds that no one else seemed to hear. Low hums, soft murmurs, sometimes even what felt like whispers calling from deep below. On the night of his 12th birthday, he dreamt of rain. Not the kind that fell from the city's storm generators, but real rain, vast, wild, endless. In his dream, the streets were gone, replaced by open plains and trees. The sky was dark, the air alive with the scent of earth. And through the middle of that world ran a massive, shimmering river, endless and alive. When he woke, his bedsheet was damp. The sound of water was everywhere. He ran to the window and gasped. The river below had risen overnight, flooding the lower walkways. People were shouting in the streets. Lights flickered. The city's emergency alerts blared, calling it a hydraulic malfunction. But Elias knew it wasn't. The water shimmered with the same light he had seen in his dream. He ran outside, barefoot, ignoring the rain that soaked him. The air smelled old, like clay and time. The river had broken its barriers and was spilling into the streets, moving with strange purpose. It wasn't chaos. It was return. Elias followed it, down the flooded avenues, past flickering lights, till he reached the oldest bridge in the city, one built long before the rest, carved from stone instead of metal. The water was highest there, swirling around the pillars, and in the center, caught between the current, something gleamed, a small, smooth stone, glowing faintly beneath the surface. He didn't know why, but he stepped into the water. It was cold, but not cruel. The current pulled at his legs, not dragging, but guiding. He reached down and touched the stone. The moment his fingers brushed it, the noise of the city vanished. The air went still. Time seemed to stop. Then came the voice. It wasn't loud, but it filled him completely, the same voice that had spoken to the young man, the scholar, and all who had listened before. "You heard me." Elias looked around, heart pounding. The water around him shimmered with light, and from it rose shapes, outlines of people, old and new, their faces both familiar and unknown. Among them, he saw a man with deep eyes, a woman holding a book, and countless others standing in silence, watching him. "Who are you?" he whispered. The voice answered, soft and vast. "We are what you forgot. We are what you are made of. We are the memory of water." He felt tears burn his eyes, though he didn't know why. The light spread, rising up his arms, surrounding him. The voices blended together, speaking not in words, but in understanding. The river sleeps, but never dies. The world changes, but the pulse remains. Every drop remembers. The glow grew brighter until it was all around him, and suddenly he could see everything: the flood, the drought, the spring, the scholar, the city, the endless turning of time. He understood then that the river was not just water, it was memory itself, flowing through all who came and went. When the light faded, he was standing alone beneath the bridge. The water had receded, calm once more. The city was quiet again, as if nothing had happened. In his hand, the stone was gone, but he could still feel its warmth pulsing in his chest, steady as a heartbeat. In the days that followed, Elias tried to tell others what he'd seen. No one believed him. They said it was a dream, a story, but he didn't need them to. He began to write, not data reports or school essays, but stories. Stories about floods, rivers, people who listened to whispers beneath the earth. He filled pages with them, night after night, as if the words were pouring out from somewhere older than himself. And though no one else could hear it, every night when the city grew quiet, the river would hum softly, steadily, as if answering him. Years passed. Elias grew older, and the city changed again. New towers rose. The old bridge was dismantled, the waterways rerouted. But beneath it all, the river still flowed, unseen. And whenever the rains came, people would notice something strange. The floodwater never caused harm. It filled the ground, cleansed the streets, then vanished, leaving behind cleaner air, richer soil. Scientists couldn't explain it, but they named the phenomenon the renewal effect. Only Elias knew what it truly was. He never said a word. When he was old and gray, he returned one last time to the bend of the river. Now, hidden beneath layers of glass and concrete, he stood there quietly, the city's neon lights reflecting on the faint movement below. He whispered. I listened, and for the first time in decades, the water answered. A single ripple spread across the surface, faint but deliberate. And in that ripple, for just a moment, he saw them all: the young man, the old woman, the scholar, the river spirit, watching him with eyes of light. They smiled, and the sound of their laughter blended with the hum of the water. The city moved on. The towers reached higher. The world grew faster, and soon, even Elias was gone. But sometimes, when the rain fell hard and the streets shone like mirrors, people swore they could hear a soft melody beneath the storm. Not noise, not wind, but something older, a whisper, a heartbeat, the river remembering itself. And so it continued unseen, unforgotten, eternal. Water moving through time, through soil, through story. The last witness gone, but the memory alive, forever flowing.